Welcome to the Software Process and Measurement Cast number 650. I'm Tom Cagley, your host today. Work entry in its simplest form is the steps needed for work to be triaged to ensure that it's the right work, that it's ready to be worked on, and the priority of the work is correct. This week, we talk about 5 common patterns. On Tuesday, I'll include a PDF in the feed to see if I can spur a discussion about other patterns. We also have a visit from Tony Timbol with his To Tell a Story column. In this installment, we discuss different forms of user stories and when to use them. Five Common Team-Level Work Entry Patterns by Thomas M. Cagley Jr., Megan E. Cagley. Work entry in its simplest form is the steps needed for work to be triaged to ensure that it's the right work, that it is ready to be worked on, and that it's the right priority. A simple work entry process for a Scrum team includes the following steps. People write stories, ideas, requirements of varying quality. These items are evaluated and cleaned up. Updated, well-formed stories are added to the backlog. Once on the backlog, those product backlog items are prioritized and reprioritized. And then finally, in time, they're pulled into a sprint. A team's work entry process is only a step on the long chain of value. Work entry gets a piece of the work to the front door, after which planning, building, delivering that product backlog item has to occur. However, if too much work is forced into the team, or the wrong work is available, or if the team is constantly interrupted with higher priorities, delivery suffers. This is not the step to mess up. There are numerous common patterns of behavior for bringing work into a team. One is the gold standard. The rest are a series of compromises. The patterns are 1. Prioritized single point of entry. 2. Prioritized pull with prioritized incident push. 3. A front door pull and a back door push. I've seen a lot of that in my life. 4. Prioritized and unprioritized push with incident flow. And number 5, the free-for-all. 1. Prioritized single point of entry. In the single point of entry scenario, teams' work funnels through a single person, usually with support and advice, that prioritizes the work based on a set of criteria. In Agile, this is known as the product owner, and they work that product backlog. The team pulls the work from the backlog as capacity is available to start and complete the work with minimal delays. This is the gold standard for work entry in the team. The work entry process is useful for avoiding 5 of the 8 causes of work entry problems. There's a link in the show notes to that essay. It includes differences in goals, needs that outstrip supply, urgency and importance dichotomy, control, and my favorite, yes-itis. This pattern of work entry generally delivers in priority order. It's close into a first in, first out kind of scenario, and the ability to predict delivery is predictable. 2. Prioritize pull with prioritize incident push. I spent a period of my career with pagers and later on-call cell phones strapped to my belt. To this day, my blood gets pumping when I hear about a juicy production incident. For any organization, the ability to make money or deliver its services trumps every other priority. This scenario reflects the reality of teams that work with products or projects and then have to support that production environment. This approach to work entry sometimes is the best the team can do. When something important, read that as prioritized, breaks in production, the team needs to find the time and effort to address that within the work they currently are doing and have pulled and planned. This work entry process is useful for avoiding only 3 of the 8 causes of work entry problems: differences in goals and control and yes-itis. The priority order of delivery is close to first in, first out, but there are obvious interruptions. The ability to deliver is mostly predictable. It's mostly predictable because there are interruptions. 3, the front door pull and the back door push. The most important feature of the work entry process in this pattern is the back door for work to get to the team's plate. In this scenario, work goes from the stakeholder to the team, in some cases, directly to the team member. Work in this case is often done off the books and interrupts work pulled by the team. The sprint goal and the goal of the team generates conflict, even if it's under the radar, and that reduces the effectiveness and predictability of the team. This pattern does not avoid any of the causes of work entry problems. This is not a good thing. One of the reasons this pattern exists is that everyone sees the prioritization process and feels like things are under control. They're not in this circumstance. This scenario is just like an infestation of carpenter ants. Once the problem is apparent, the damage is done. Delivery pattern in this case, semi-erratic. The ability to deliver is unpredictable, but it's not too terrible. This is probably the most common. We have a product owner that prioritizes things, and those are pulled in. Great, wonderful. But that back door where stuff gets stuffed in because they know somebody is a distinct problem. It interrupts things. Sounds good, not good. 4, prioritized and unprioritized push with incident flow. We're getting close to the really bad stuff here. The final in-between case, in between the bookends of wonderful and really crazy, is just slightly less bad than the free-for-all. At least some of the work is prioritized and known up front. The combination of push and backdoor entry of work generates a mess and leads to poor morale, poor quality, irritated stakeholders. Users in this pattern rationalize using phrase like, "We must be responsive. Saying no is not an option. And this is a dynamic and exciting environment." This scenario always, I stress the word always, ends badly for someone. Delivery pattern is erratic. Lots of interruptions, stuff happens, lots of erratic. Delivery pattern, it's just unpredictable. So stuff goes in, and when it comes out, nobody knows. Free-for-all, number 5. In the free-for-all scenario, each person on the team sees themselves as a free agent, out to maximize the perception of their individual utility, so they accept work as they see fit. Work is either pushed to the team or individuals pull it in themselves. This is the worst case scenario for work entry. This approach solves none of the 8 causes of work entry problems, and is one of them actually, and is always a reflection of deeper issues in the organization. Delivery pattern, unpredictable. Ability to deliver, absolutely inconsistent. Work entry is not the sexiest topic in Agile. As a matter of fact, the topic is generally not understood unless a team has a mature process for working. In several recent conversations, I asked how individuals and teams get the work they work on. The answers ranged from, we triage the work with our product owner, to the phone rings and somebody's manager tells me what to do. I was also accused of being a killjoy for bringing the topic up during a happy hour. Note to self, don't do that again. Teams find themselves in one of the 5 basic patterns for a reason. Many times those reasons are not of their own making, but rather are accommodations to behaviors the organization chooses not to address. For example, one of the 8 practices causing work entry problems is pay practices. Teams don't own pay policies within organizations. Being able to recognize where a team lies on the work entry continuum is a step toward improvement, a step that can build on ideas and coaching techniques for moving from chaos to predictability. Thoughts, comments, all welcome. Please feel free to reach out to us at spamcastinfo@gmail.com. We look forward to the conversation. Hey, Tony Timbol, welcome back to the Software Process and Measurement Cast.
Well, thanks. This is great. I'm glad to be back again to chat about stories. This is cool.
Your To Tell a Story column is, I think, one of the brand, obviously it is the brand new column, but the impact, I think, is really important because it talks to how to use the things that we use this idea of a user story. We throw that out there like it's almost an icon or some sort of religious artifact, and everybody's supposed to know how to use them. Of course they are. They're ubiquitous. But I don't think that's true, right? I don't think everybody knows how to use it. Today, let's wrestle with the concept of the whole idea of, are there multiple kinds of stories, or there's just one standard user story and Katie barred the door after that?
Well, as with anything in the technology world, right? We're all smart software engineers or technologists and whatever, and we always think we can improve on something. So when the user story form came out, obviously, people started to use it, they started to like it. But then invariably someone's going to say, it doesn't quite meet my situation. And that's okay. It was written, the original form of as a goal, as a role, I want a goal so that I have a benefit, answered the who, what, and why question. But sometimes software is not as persona driven versus it being system driven or non-user driven. In other words, driven by systems and networks and software that doesn't really have a user interface. There's no website visitor. If you look at Mike Cohn's public list of the 200 user stories that he sends out a lot to everybody, you see a lot of different types of user stories. And so he himself has experimented with an idea of what's called a job story, which has a different syntax than the user story. And his syntax for the job story is, when there's a particular situation, I want to do something of a motivation so I can achieve an outcome. So his, what I would call variable tags versus fixed tags are different, where as a role, I want a goal so as a is a fixed tag, I want is a fixed tag, so that is a fixed tag. Then you got the variable parts of it. For a job story, when a certain situation occurs, I want a particular thing to happen so I can get a particular outcome. And so that particular job story form has been talked about, and I think some people use it. If you Google different user story forms, you'll see other ideas. And then, of course, there's the very popular testing language form of the Gherkin language, of given, when, then construct that's used for test-driven or behavior-driven development. So there are different type of story syntaxes that people can use that may be a better fit for their circumstances.
Well, Tony, since you are not only a consultant and guru and deep thinker and entrepreneur and science fiction author, oh God, how many other things could we list out? Since you're also all of that stuff and a practitioner, which ones do you use and when do you use them?
So the defaults, the simplest one is as a role, I want a goal so that I have a benefit. That is the easiest to teach and the easiest for people to grab a hold of. However, it can provide some challenges. For example, let's say you're writing an API that doesn't really have any user experience or interface. So who's the person using the API? Well, it's another system, right? So as another system, I want to make an API call so that I can connect to Jira. So it's a little clunky, can be a little clunky, and not spur the kind of conversations that you want to have around the work. So the BDD or test development story types, given when then, that sort of makes sense. For example, in the Agile Ready product that we've released, we have some examples of that for when we have more system-oriented stories. So we have a simulation of a user story where you're trying to write software for the Zap car, electric car, and it has a neat little feature called a chase drone that you launch from the back of the car as you driving down the road, and the chase drone is going to take pictures of your car and stream them on Facebook, right? Real vanity project, right? So, but a user story such as, given that the bay doors are open and airspeed is under 100 miles an hour, then launch the drone. That construct makes a little more sense than, as a Zap car, I want to open bay doors so that I can launch the drone. So depending upon the context, that syntax may be more useful for an organization. And different teams could use different syntaxes. And I just think mix and match, do what works. Teams can figure out what they can do and what can work for them. They should just use them.
So when you're actually working with a team or watching them write user stories, do you see them flip back and forth? And what kind of risks do you see when they're flipping back and forth between different kinds of stories or different kind of story construct?
Right. So when you're in an enterprise setting, the enterprises have this tendency to want to set standards. The assumption being standards drive quality, right? And whether that does or not is another whole other discussion. But they're saying, well, this is our standard form. Everybody use the form number 1. Well, maybe. So, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. So I basically say, look, these are what are available to you. Do what makes sense. Invariably, if they start using non-quote approved forms, someone's going to say, well, who told you to do that? So there's always caveats. But if I was consulting a startup or consulting another firm that did not have, let's say, stringent compliance standards, and they just wanted to write stories that made sense for them, I said, look, use these 3 forms when it makes sense for you, that you're comfortable with. And then over time, you figure out what's best for you. I think one of the things that we don't do is we don't let teams become learning organizations, and we don't let them fail. We don't give them a safe space to fail. And so we immediately think, use this form, it'll get you successful right away, instead of them becoming a learning team that can figure out this is what we really need to do. And what's important with that is because scope changes every season, every project. You're doing something different. And sometimes the scope itself will drive a better use of a different form than just saying you only have to use a particular form. And so that's one of the reasons why we built the three options within Agile Ready, was to say, look, we're going to give people the flexibility to do whatever the heck they want, right? If you want to use the as a role, if you want to use given when then, you want to use the job story form, it's all there for you. Now, future ideas, there's other forms out there that may arise, and we're going to be flexible enough to be able to hopefully adopt those and allow folks to use it. And our ultimate goal is to build in a feature where you can actually create your own syntax. In other words, you can create your own user story form pattern that you can then use for your organization. So that's where we want to head up to give people and empower people to give them that flexibility.
At some point in the future, I think I want to go down the path of discussing whether or not allowing people to create their own doesn't disrupt the overall discipline. I mean,
good point.
There's and we can discuss this on another column.
That's right.
So, Tony, how can people continue the conversation? How can they talk to you or find out about two things? One, how can they connect with you so they can talk about story some more? And how can they reach out and find you in terms of your brand new, wonderful Agile Ready product?
Sure. So the best way is just send me an email at tony.timbol, Timbol, at agileready.net. And let's just start an email conversation. If you're inclined to experiment and want to play around with the tool, there's free trial editions. Just go to beagileready.com, BEAGILE ready.com, and experiment with it. And we'll get a hold of you. If you register, we'll know who you are. We'll say hello, give you a big welcome hug, and then we can have a conversation.
Absolutely fantastic. Tony, your column to tell a story, I think, is really dead on and providing practical and useful advice. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Remember, the Software Process and Measurement Cast is a proud media sponsor of the Global Scrum Master Summit. The first Global Scrum Master Summit will be held the week of May 17th, 2021. It'll be a combination of live and recorded. Check it out. Link in the show notes. Get a ticket. Decide to really upgrade your Scrum Mastership. In Reread Saturday News, speaking of Scrum, we're on Chapter 13 of Fixing Your Scrum, Practical Solutions to Common Scrum Problems by Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller. This week, the chapter talks about deployable product increments and done. What we deliver is a big deal. Getting it right is the difference between satisfactions and all sorts of stress. We're getting close to the end of the book, and I'd like your input on what to tackle next. If you've not bought your copy, use the link in the show notes. Read along. All the installments are on the blog. In the next Software Process and Measurement Cast, we talk to Dr. Eric Cole. We talk cybersecurity and entrepreneurship. If you did not understand the potential impact of security, just find any newspaper for Sunday, May 9th or Saturday, May 8th, and read about the ransomware attack on the Colonial Pipeline. This is not a drill. This is not hype. If process improvement is a never-ending journey, why do so many people ask, are we there yet?